I'm Steve Parkzonski, the superintendent. We'd like to begin our public meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if everyone would please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thank you all for being here. What we typically do first is introduce our candidates for election to the Board of Education. And our tradition is we just go in alphabetical order. So I'll invite Mark Beardsley to come up first and introduce himself.
Use the podium, or?
You can do that or just stand in front of the podium. If you're close enough to that microphone, then
Okay.
they'll be able to hear you on the camera.
Hi there, I'm Mark. I'm a lifelong resident of the district. I've had a daughter that graduated from South Seneca in 2013, and I've got a grandson that was born in September, and he'll be starting school in 4 years. And the reason why I'm running for school board is that I want to have my grandson have a good education. So, but I look forward to working with the administration. I look forward to working with my fellow board members. So, that's it. I do the KISS approach. You know what that is?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep it super simple. That's what that means, right?
Yeah, that's right. And Ed Granger.
My name's Ed Granger. I'm a lifelong resident and an alumni of South Seneca. I have attended many board meetings in the past few years, and I'm aware of many issues. I believe in the 3 F's: family first and foremost, faith in our community action, and freedom of choice and speech. And I'm always ready to listen. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Yep.
Going to move right on to our budget hearing presentation. The goal of this is just to present the final version of the budget that was developed with the Board of Education over the course of the spring. Of course, probably everybody knows the story of this spring. When we received the governor's executive budget in late January, we were shocked to see a proposal for a reduction in foundation aid of $1.5 million. So we spent most of the spring advocating against that. And thankfully, when the legislature finalized the budget, along with the governor, all of that money was restored and Save Harmless was restored. It came with a warning, though, that this may be the last year that we have Save Harmless. So a challenge for this board moving forward as we operate under this budget is to be looking at projections for the next year to see what will happen with foundation aid and make some decisions around, especially about personnel. But the good news is for this year, Save Harmless is preserved, and the board ended up coalescing around essentially a rollover budget from the previous year. So the exact same program of 2023-24 is proposed for this upcoming year. That made things a little bit simpler in terms of the expenditure side, and we just had to wait for the final state budget to get all the final revenue projections. When it was all in, it was in time for the budget newsletter, and I'll introduce Miguel Andrade to present this year's budget proposal.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody. This is a new setup. As you can see, TV is on the left, podium's here, and everybody's looking at me. So I'm going to just bear with me for a little bit until I get acquaintance here.
You do have that clicker there.
Okay, good. Oh, that's right. Okay. Let's see. Nope, I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. Right?
I know it was working before.
Oh, all right. Anyway, good evening, everybody. I'm going to be working from both sides because,
It works, just left, right.
perfect, thank you, Steve. I have some notes that I wrote down, and, I couldn't put them in there on time, so I'm just going to talk and move around a little bit so everybody can see me walk around. Anyway, 24-25. Let's talk about our current conditions expenditures. So for 24-25, as we've spoken in the Buildings and Grounds meetings, there's a 24-25 capital outlay, which includes some signage and maintenance work at the elementary school. Our contractual obligations range from 4 to 8% for the next year. We're going to see these actual amounts of salaries in other slides in a minute. Between ERS and TRS, we project a 10% to a 14% increases based on salaries. The health insurance came in at 675% increase. Somewhat conservative. We wanted to go a little higher, but we settled on 675. The debt service payments, which we'll talk about in another slide too, that decreased, that went down from 3.3 million to 1.2 million. Fuel prices based on recent billings that we have gotten range from anywhere from $2.97 to $4.97. And a reminder that the budget that is finalized in this June, it was passed for $26,864,000. All right, now we look at the revenue side. So foundation aid, stay flat, thank you. There were some slight increases on BOCES aid and transportation aid. So the timing was that when the governor sends their proposal out, all our numbers, our expenditure numbers are not in the system as final. So that is why there's always a change between the governor's and the final budget. And once our true expenses, because remember, when we went over the list of items that make up the New York State, some of them are driven by expenses, how much expenses we do. So either in the summer, what I do is I put in what we actually spend and what we project to spend the following year. And they use the projection number to come with the governor's run. And then when all our numbers are finalized and approved, auditor's report go out and everything like that, now they use the actual expenses, and most of the time the BOCES foundation, BOCES, transportation aid, building aid, those are the ones that change a little bit because now they're working with actual numbers. All right, so it did come in a little higher, which is great. That's included in the budget. So that's the story about that. Interest rates are currently from 3.95 to 5.38. We're projecting that these may stay continuously through the summer. So that's good news. Not so much good when you're trying to borrow, but we have the money so we can invest. Property tax cap, year 13, we are at 2.74%. CPI came in at 4.12, remembering that tax cap only limits us to a 2% increase. We're gonna have to rely on appropriated reserves appropriations and reserves to balance the budget. And like I was mentioning, our foundation, it has stayed flat because of the safe harvest. But with the scare that we had, we were projected to lose about $1.5 million. So based on the current formula, our foundation aid it's flat, or actually safe harvest keeps us at the same amount as last year, but there's going to be some adjustment. And this is what Steve was referring to going forward. We're going to have to look at the budget closer to account for those decreases in revenue. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but New York State budget overview. Some of the highlights after the historic investments in New York State budget from our governor. Increase in school aid by $1.3 billion to nearly $36 billion in total. Brought back safe harvest, thank you. Used what was used to project the foundation aid was an average inflation rate. That's what we usually was used, an average. I think it's 10-year average. Instead of the prior year to calculate increases. So when they look at foundation aid, they looked at what happened last year, the inflation of last year. So the increase is higher because now our inflation is rising. So always the increase was going to be higher. What they did this year was they looked at an average. So our high numbers for the last 2-3 years, they were minimized because in previous years, our inflation was not that high. We were actually under the 2%. So that kind of brought down the amount of money that we would have gotten instead. So that was a big change. Not sure if that's going to carry over to future foundation aid calculations, but there is a Rockefeller Institute study that is going to come out within a year, and depending on the timing of that and the implementation time, many of my colleagues think that, and maybe it's wishful thinking, that the study will come out, but there's not going to be enough time to implement. So we might have another pass next year, but with this governor and the fact that there's none of the legislative seats are going to be up for grabs, we don't know what's going to happen. So it's kind of scary at the same time, but we're really interested to see what the study is going to come out, and the foundation aid calculation is simpler, more straightforward, and specific things like special needs schools are incorporated in the formula. That would be great for us. But for the meantime, we're working with a flat budget, flat foundation aid, and going forward, we'll need to change our approach about the budget. And finally, the South Seneca will continue to set aside the $100,000 for community school aid. So what's our plan for South Seneca? So to maintain current 23-24 budget projections and the savings to be added to appropriated fund balance for future budgets, go at the tax levy of 2.74%. Pre-purchase 24-25 items with 23-24 remaining contingency budget. That's at a case by case. We're not too crazy of going out and buying things immediately. It's whatever we need in order to continue our business for the current year, and anything that comes next year, we have the budget to do so. We continue to use federal funds, especially this year is the last year that we're going to have the ARP. There's some money that is going to be left over for September of next year, but that's just 1 month out of the 12. So really, we're using up all the stimulus money as of June 30th. We're going to plan aggressively for 25, 26, and beyond, working on a plan to see what foundation aid is going to look like, how other revenue streams are going to look like in our expenditures. That in relation with the strategic use of reserves and appropriated fund balance will go together. Steve and I are working on the projection for over 3 years, see where our expenses are going to head and where our revenues are going to head, and then what our usage of appropriation fund balance and reserves look like. Meaning, are we going to be running out anytime? Or are we going to be okay? Those are the projections for the next 3 years. And continue to monitor the market for investment opportunities. And any state aid that we got that we didn't project will go straight back to appropriation fund balance for reserves to balance the budget in future years. All right, many of you have seen this. New York State came in at $13,152,000, a decrease about $2 million, and that is because of the debt service foundation aid portion of it, building aid. Local taxes was calculated at $9,095,000. Debt service, we're projected to use $500,000 to balance the budget. All other revenue we're projected to receive at $1.1 million. We're appropriating from fund balance about a little more than $1 million to balance the budget, and we're going to use about $1.2 million in reserve to make the budget whole. Now, in the slide here, you can see on the bottom what the $1.2 million is made up of. EVLAR is for retirement incentives. Depending on where we are next year, what's going to happen, there might be some retiring. We always put the buses in there. Again, this doesn't mean that we're going to use the reserve to pay them. It's just in case we have to use the budget amount for something else, we have the capability. The board will give us the capability to use the $400,000 from the reserve pool. All right. ERS, based on the last year's bill, we can use up to $350,000 of reserves. And the liability, which ties to any claims, like the roof project, projecting to use $200,000 going forward to next year. Again, these are estimates, and this just gives us an allowance to be able to use. We don't want to use the budgeted number, we can use the reserves. That's pretty much what that is. Here we have the revenue breakdown per percentages. You can see New York State aid is at 50%, local tax is 35%, and all other portions of the revenue are either from 2%, 4%, and 5% of the total budget. Looking at the expenditure budget, comparing it to last year, we were at 26.8 million. We're coming in at 24-25 budget at 26,124. That's a 2.76% budget to budget decrease. And we're going to see later where the decrease is coming from. This is what we need to disclose to the voters in presentations. The budget has to be broken down between administration, capital, and program. And here are the components of each of the three. Board of Education, Central Administration, Business Administration are included in the total administration column. The operation of plant, maintenance of plant, debt service. As you can see, the debt service right there, when you compare 24-25 at $1.2 million, decreased from the $3.3 million from last year. That's where the budget numbers swing downward, is that principal and interest payment of debt service that dropped off our books. We don't need to budget for that number anymore because there's no debt. So that's why the budget dropped that amount. Now, of course, there's an increase on the operating side of the budget, which netted and yield the $2.2 million or increase over that, if you saw in the other slide. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the big component, the total program, we increased from 17.6 million to 18.8 million from last year. It's made up of pretty much all our programs: teaching, occupational education, school library, guidance, psychology, co-curriculum, extra class, and transportation garage. And of course, every single of these components have a benefit portion to it. Total budget for the year 24-25, 26,124. There's the 740,000 decrease, 2.76% from last year. Here is a pie chart of what each component percentage-wise is about. Administrations, it's been around 12%. Capital, 16%, and the big one, program, 72%. All right, now this slide right here, the attempt of this slide is to give you a picture of two things: the operating budget and the debt service budget. Debt service is our principal and interest payments of every construction project that we have done in the past. These things run from 15 years to 30 years, depending on what you're doing. New building, 30 years. Improvements of buildings, 15 years. There's other projects that you can go lower than 15, but not that many. Anyway, you can see that we were hovering around $3.3 million all the way up to 23-24, and then we dropped down below $1.3 million between the building aid and the principal and interest. And what we want to show you here is this little gap in between. This is the local share. So our building aid comes in, we get the local share, and then we pay our bill. That's what it is. So during this time, across these years, we have maintained the 400,000, maintained the 400,000. So that's just a drop from one year to the next. But our goal is to always maintain that local share. So right now, we're not showing here any increases because we truly don't know at what interest rate we're going to borrow for the capital project that's happening. But you will see in next year's budget a jump up again. And what you're supposed to be looking for is that gap the same? is the 400,000 the same? And that is what we always are shooting for. We talk to our architects, we talk to our fiscal advisors. That is the goal, to keep the local share the same so there's no local tax impact on any project or any borrowing related to that budget. All right? So next year, once we settle on the numbers and we truly know how much we're going to need to borrow, this is going to jump up from 25, 26, 26, 27. And the focus is to keep that local share the same. That's the goal. Because we don't want to assume extra debt, extra expenses from our budget. We don't want to. We want to keep the 400,000. That's the goal. All right. Everything else is building A refundable. So once we get a building A, we use the 400,000 local share and we pay our principal and interest for that year. Debt service. Now, this is the rest of the budget or the operational side of the budget. Just want to point out that we had settled a few contracts, or mostly all contracts, during the last 3 years. There was an increase of 900,000 on new expenditures from 22-23, 23-24, $1 million, and then another $1.4 million for the contracts that we settled. I want to say TAG and SSEA adjustment happened here. SSCA and teachers were done around here, and this is the teachers going, and everybody else is going forward, right? Because now we signed contracts over multiple years. We started with some of the contracts here. Other contracts were added to, not dropped. And then finally, the final settlement of the contracts going forward. So you can see that although debt service decreased, our budget decreased, our operational side has increased or assumed more expenses over the last 3 years, including this year. So I just want to say that now that all the contracts are settled, our projection is going to be steady and no more jumps because all the contracts have been settled. We have now some sort of stability to understand where we're going to head going forward in the future years better. That's all I'm going to say about that. Again, this is something that we're probably going to have to look next year during the course of the budget to see what we could do to reduce that increase. Okay. Now I'm going to head to town tax rates. We've seen this slide before. I break it down between the towns. There's a column for equalization rate, the tax rate per 1,000 for 24-25, and the tax rate for 23-24 per 1,000, and the change. You can see from 23-24 to 24-25, Corver had a 0.35% or cent change. Lodi, Ovid, and Romulus were at 54, and Hector had a 30-cent change. The tax rates here are based on two things, equalization rates and assessments values. The equalization rate comes from New York State, and it states what our true assessment should be in the eyes of the state. Anything under 100% means that our property is undervalued, and it should be higher. It should be assessed at a higher amount. So that is why we have these higher amounts, $13.25, $20, $11. But our true rate at 100%, it's 9.93. So that is at 100%. If all our properties were 100%, that's what our true tax rate will be. A couple of examples. We see that a house in Covert has an equalization rate of 75%, meaning that for New York State, the value of that house is $133,000 at $13.25 rate per 1,000. Lodi, same value of home, but now the equalization rate in Lodi is 49%. That pretty much doubles it, plus some more, and brings it up to $20.28. Again, the two things that impact the tax rate, equalization rates, and new or increased assessment values. So what we do, the district, we look at the assessments that are done by the towns. We looked at what the equalization rate updates from New York State are. We put them together, and then we take the tax levy and we put it in the formula, and we see how much of the tax levy the town of Lodi is going to take. How much of the levy, 9,095,000, how much of that is going to go to Lodi, Corver, based on these equalization rates. So the whole point of it is to see who is going to get what amount. And depending on what the equalization rate is, you either can get more or less. In the next slide, looking at true rates across the counties, you can see that we're pretty low, 9.94, just a little above Penn Yan, but under places like Waterloo, Newfield, Ithaca, Bloomfield, Groton, Trumansburg, and other districts. Okay. Now, this is Steve's favorite part. What if the budget is voted down? Well, there's a couple of things that we could do. We can, in the month of June, they set up a date, June 18, I'm sorry, to do a second vote. So what we can do is go back to this with the same budget, same number, same everything, and try again. We can change the budget, most likely decrease the budget, take some things out, and go with those figures for June 18th. Or we can go straight to contingency budget. And we don't have to wait for the vote. Or if we go to the vote with any of the other two choices, the same amount or something lower, if that gets defeated, then we go to contingency. So all roads point to contingency budget, could be. So what is the contingency budget? It's just an amount of the budget that you can use or go out at that will maintain the school district, operate and maintain school buildings, and provide educational programs, preserve the property of the district, and ensure the health and safety of students and staff, the minimum amount. And we're talking about an $870,000 reduction in the budget per contingency budget figures. So here on this slide, you can see both the proposed budget, $26,124,000, 276% budget to budget decrease, assuming tax levy cap at $274, maintain current staff and programs, purchase equipment, continue existing facility use procedures, classroom budget provides supplies, all the stuff that we have budget for. In the contingency budget, the final number comes at $25,253,000. That's a 6% decrease from budget to budget. Tax levy goes down to zero, so that increase of $220,000, that goes away. We can't use that revenue. $242,000, I'm sorry. So we have to look somewhere to make up for that $242,000, looking at the expenses. And then there's a leftover of $627,000 in additional that we looked at admin, staff, and program cuts. We can't touch capital. That stays flat. That stays the same number. So our debt service, you can't get out of paying your mortgage or keep it maintaining the facilities operational and everything. But you could touch the other two, administration and program. So $627,000 has to come out. There's a formula that says the administration has to be a specific amount. You can get over that. So that percentage, we keep under that percentage, and then anything left over, we got to go into the program side and start deducting. So we have to look for $627,000 more, plus the $242,000. That brings us to the $800,000 that we need to decrease. What does that mean? So we probably have to eliminate new and replacements of equipment, including computer, instruments, maintenance, weight room equipment. Capital outlay, signage may have to be put on hold. Other things like certain supplies have to be put on hold. Salary increases for management, confidential, civil service employees, not covered by collective bargaining agreement can go without an increase for the following year. Every other bargaining agreement contracts need to be respected and paid in full. All right, so these are the propositions that are gonna come on May 21st. Proposition 1, that the voters approve a $26,124,252 budget for the 24-25 school year. Proposition number 2 is not to exceed $530,000 worth of expenses related to school buses and/or one van. Proposition number 3 is the collection of $257,580 of taxes related to the libraries in your school tax bill. And proposition number 4 is to elect 2 members to the board for a 3-year term commencing July 1st, 2024 and expiring June 30th, 2027. And that vote date, May 21st, from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the auditorium at Interlaken campus. And that's what I got for the presentation. Thank you.
Does anybody have questions?
On the first slide there, the fuel purchases, is that through state contracts?
Yes, most, if not all, our contracts are, are bid, state contract, or under the threshold where we have to go bid. But we always get quotes, and there's procedures that to.
Are they good for a year?
Yes,
You lock those prices?
we lock them. We lock those prices for a year. Yes.
We'll say we have one more week to go before the vote, so for anybody watching at home, we encourage questions. When questions come up, please reach out. You can contact me directly or Miguel directly and get me your answers. As we said, the goal is that people are well informed when they go to vote, and that's all happening a week from tonight.
Budget notices should be going out, and you should be getting those in the mail.